Hi, I'm Dave. I've been working on the node certifications for some time, and I'm super excited to share with you what to expect from the certifications and what they're about, and a little bit about the process of how they were created. If you want to look at more into the details, the OpenJS Foundation website has a certification route that you can check out. This was the collaboration between not just different organizations, but also there was a lot of community members, particularly in the kickoff, and I'll talk a bit more about that shortly. So this is a product of a lot of different people's involvements at different levels. The organizations involved are Nearform, NodeSource, OpenJS, a company called PSI, which do proctoring, which I'll talk about later, and TrueAbility, which provide the remote exam experience. So before getting involved in creating a certification or helping to create a certification, the first question I needed to ask myself was like, why do that? What's the value proposition of a certification for Node.js? And mainly it's because it's an optimization. It's a way for, if done correctly, it's a way for you to showcase your abilities in shorthand, and it's a way for employers to find the people that the skill level that they're looking for, and to create a kind of standard around that skill level. I don't know if anyone else has noticed, but the concept of a junior or intermediate or senior developer, those are very fluid concepts, depending even on the industry vertical. So an intermediate developer in a technical company would sometimes tend to be considered at a higher level, or they would have a higher skill level potentially than an intermediate developer in a non-tech company. Not necessarily, but I'm saying that these are fluid concepts. So the certification hopefully can help bring some more standardization to this is a specific skill level that has been validated. And it's about creating opportunities as well. It's about allowing other pathways into programming. Myself, I was self-taught, and this was something that would have benefited me massively 10 years ago. So the certification kicked off in Austin in 2016, about December time. There was a committee of volunteers that sort of responded to the Node Foundation at the time, and from memory, and forgive me if anyone's watching this or anyone who was there, but there were representatives from Nearform, NodeSource, GoDaddy, Netflix, I believe Walmart was there, and then there were some independents as well. And there was a psychometrician. So a psychometrician is someone who specializes in the creation of exam content certifications and creating content in a way that is balanced and that works to properly validate a particular skill set. So what we did there is we defined as a group over 2 days the topic areas for the certification and what we called tasks, which were sort of breaking down those topics into key tasks that we would expect someone who worked with Node at an intermediate to upper intermediate level. Some of the principles that came out of that and that I then held to for the next 2.5 years, were that the certification should be outcome-focused, that it should be framework and library agnostic, because Node, possibly more than any other language, has so many different options in the ecosystem of how to do things that we couldn't just say, oh, it's going to be this framework. So we wanted to support real-world practices. It needed to be reflective of actual real-world development rather than a puzzle-solving exercise. And we wanted to avoid penalizing different approaches that didn't match the expectations of our implementation. So again, had to be outcome-focused. In terms of the rigor applied, the certification, it's been peer-reviewed by, I don't know if anyone, I'm sure some people have heard of Matthias Booz, Luca Moraski, who's with us today, Charlie Robbins. These people all were involved in peer reviewing. It was alpha tested with free-form feedback. It was beta tested with about 150 to 160 beta testers, and then it went for a final psychometric review. So it started with a psychometration, and just before release, it went through another psychometric review to ensure that the standard was appropriate. In terms of long-term integrity, as in how do we make sure that certification can't be abused or that it isn't devalued by that kind of abuse? The question, when you do the examination, you don't necessarily get the same questions every time, but the questions are equivalent in that there are variants of the questions. It's also proctored, and that means that someone essentially is watching your screen, and you can actually interact with them when you're doing the examination as well. It has, well, we're looking into release cycles so that the certification maps against the way the industry moves forward. And there's also the potential to sample any of the exams that are done in real time. We can sample those sessions after the fact. I ended up being the primary author of the certification, but I just want to be clear, there were other people involved, but I either wrote or reviewed all of the content. Just in terms of quality assurance, again, some of my credentials, I'm principal architect at Nearform. I've been programming for over 20 years. I started from a young age. I've been in Node.js consultancy and solutions for over 6 years. There's some libraries that I'm the author of, if anyone's heard of Pinot or ZeroX. I've been training and mentoring for over 8 years, and I'm the author of Node Cookbook, shameless plug. I actually was writing this at the same time as I was writing the certification content, so pro tip. Exam expectations, what to expect from the actual exam environment. It's a remote desktop. It's, as I said, remotely proctored, you're actually interacting with. You can use any ecosystem libraries. Use npm install whatever you want, and you can use any online resources while you're taking the exam, except for things like Stack Exchange, Stack Overflow, any of those subsidiary companies, subsidiary sites. So it is very free in the way that you can do the exam, because again, we're trying to measure real-world development, not your ability, not memory retention. It's about problem solving. The virtual machine environment is desktop Linux. So if you were interested in taking the certification and you are used to Windows, then it's worth maybe familiarizing yourself with desktop Linux. This is just a constraint that's the result of difficulties around providing lots of different environments and the difficulties of having a remote exam. It has Visual Studio Code on it, it has Vim on it, it has Postman for API calls, it has terminals, and it has Chrome. So we actually ended up creating 2 certifications because the content clocked in at about a 5-hour exam, which was just too much. So we have 2 certifications at 2 2-hour exams, and we pruned the content down. We have Node.js application developer and Node.js services developer. So I'm going to talk about what each of those are and what they intend to do. So the Node application developer certification is about overall competency, your general competency with Node. So if you were to create any kind of application and you have passed this certification, then there's a high degree of confidence that you're going to be fairly proficient in doing that. It's about establishing fundamental concepts in Node, checking for common use cases, and it's really about finding the intersection of the ways that Node is used without prescribing exactly what they are. So what I mean by that is the Node application developer, when created, was created around Node Core APIs, but you don't have to use Node Core APIs to answer the questions. So for instance, if it's a question about the file system, we don't check that you use the core file system module. We only check that you, say, wrote a file to disk as per the question, right? So it's marked on outcomes, not on API knowledge. Again, library framework agnostic. The application developer exam is lots of small questions, around 20 to 28, 27, 28 questions, something like that. And they're about 5 to 10 minutes per question. I think there's maybe one that's about 15 minutes that we've estimated them to take. And there's 13 topic domains. As I say, this is about your overall competency. So we cover like a broad surface area, including making sure that you know some sort of key JavaScript things as well. There's a ghastly pie chart, but hey, lots of colors are hard, especially for me. So that's how that kind of breaks down that way. And Node Services Developer is about checking practical effectiveness. So it covers one of the most common use cases of Node.js, which is creating servers and services, particularly RESTful services. And it also checks for fundamental security practices. So this is about making sure that in a role where you're in a company creating services, can you create them in a way that isn't going to create a vulnerability? That's Node Services Developer. It's a very small amount of involved questions. So I think that's maybe 4, maybe 5 questions. And they're 15 to 30 minutes each. So in this exam, it's more about having a task to do and then building that task out, similar to how you would do in the real world, like where you need to create a service that talks to a database or that talks to other services. Again, it's library and framework agnostic. You can use Express, you can use Happy, Restify, Fastify, Koa, whatever you want, you can use it in the exam. And there's only the 2 broad topic domains. 70% is servers and services as a topic domain, and 30% is security. Okay. So that's the certification. The price that was set by the foundation for each of the certifications was $300. We announced the certification a couple of weeks ago, and there were some points made in the community about that figure. So I'm going to talk about that for anyone that was watching that conversation in the community, and to kind of address it. So the feedback was that $300 is very affordable for companies, but not necessarily affordable for every individual. particularly because the certification is very much about helping people get into the job market. And this is an absolutely fair criticism from my point of view. The OpenJS Foundation put out a response to this, which was essentially that they were happy for the feedback, they wanted to know more feedback, and they'd be providing a solution in the coming weeks. I can't speak for the foundation, and they're still formulating their response, but scholarships is one of the likely options. Another way to address this issue is geo-pricing, where you price for different regions, but that doesn't actually address socioeconomic inequality in, say, the same country. And it's also very complex to do from a technical perspective because, hey, VPNs, right? What will probably happen, and I'm sure this will be confirmed in the next few weeks, confirmed whether or not I'm telling the truth, is that the foundation will want to partner with other nonprofits to give them scholarships. And the more nonprofits that partner, the more scholarships there'll be. So in this way, we can address different sectors and different needs for providing access to the certification. Because, again, I'm talking personally, my own personal opinion, I think that's what the foundation should be for, is for helping people get into programming and providing support in that area. And I think that this would be a good way to go. Another way to allow access for particularly independent programmers is through regular promotions. There's actually one happening right now, and now I'm shilling, but here it is. 12th to the 18th of November this week, and you can use that code for the application developer exam. So it's from $300 to $179, and for the services developer exam, from $300 to $179 as well. Or you can get them both together for $329. The idea is that these are run not as just a one-off forever, but as regular promotions. So it gives access to people that are coming at it from an independent point of view rather than their employer paying for the certification, which will also happen. Also, free retake. So because you're working with a remote environment, there can be issues of lag, potentially. You can't rule out that sort of thing when you're working with the network. So you can retake for any reason whatsoever, and it's free. And those are the things that have been put in place to try to make it as fair as possible for everyone, given all of the constraints. So before I start talking about the future, I just want to acknowledge that this was as I said at the beginning, a community effort. There were some people that were involved at certain points and weren't involved at other points. In particular, I want to give a shout out to Tracy Hines, who kicked it off in the first place and who laid down a bunch of things and had that initial energy and momentum to get things started. If you don't know Tracy Hines, find her on Twitter, or you can find me on Twitter as well. Yeah, she's great. Okay, so future of the certification is to keep applying pressure to move forwards towards accessible pricing. Potential for evergreen certifications where we track the LTS version. By LTS version, I mean, well, there's currently 2, right? So LTS is currently 10 and 12. So the exam is against 10 right now. 10 will reach maintenance in April. So we would be expecting to update it to 12 in April. And then this year, 12 is actually, currently, 12 looks like it's scheduled to go into maintenance in October 2020, and 14 will be released in 2020, and so we'll be mapping the certification to those as well. So the idea is to keep it updated, but to keep it equivalent, if that makes sense. For instance, the ES6 modules flag was literally yesterday just removed. The experimental flag was removed from node 13. So there's a possibility that it's going to be in node 14 and maybe even node 12, and that will change the content of the certification by saying, okay, well, you can use CommonJS requires, but now you can also use ES6 imports. So yeah, well, there's going to be continued maintenance of the certification. Maybe more certifications, question mark. And if anyone has any other ideas about the future, talk to me. If anyone wants to talk about this further, please come and talk to me. Yeah, I've got 4 minutes left, but that's essentially the overview of the certification. Thanks.